All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to learn about the evaluation and essay assignment guidelines. This is kind of the core of what we're going to be doing. You could see in the upper right-hand corner that this is in the final draft section, so hopefully it ends up there when we're done. And I'd like to go ahead and read through this and note a couple of things beyond what's written on the page that are important. Abby, could you read the first paragraph, write an evaluation?
Write an evaluation of an argument using the criteria that you developed as a group during class. The purpose of this essay is to evaluate how well a particular writer argued, not what is being argued in the original essay. You do not have to agree or disagree with the writer in order to evaluate the argument. You do, however, have to know what good argumentative writing is.
So one of the things that we're going to do as a class is we're going to eventually put up some criteria for evaluation. So we're going to put logos, pathos, ethos on the board, and then we're going to break it down by different ways of judging whether a piece of writing is effective or not. And we're going to try to break down which umbrella term they fall under. And so you're going to have a list of options essentially after that. Probably 12 to 15 different things, and you're going to need 3 of them. And that'll help guide you to what you're going to talk about when you analyze whether or not the article is effective. The other thing you should note is that this is not an argumentative essay. You are not going to talk about whether or not you think they are right. You're going to talk about whether or not you think they wrote the article well. I want to read your whole thing and have no idea if you even have an opinion on the topic. So if we wrote it about let them eat cash, whether you think we should give money to poor people or not is absolutely not relevant to this. Instead, it should be about whether he wrote it well. And you could say, I disagree, but man, that article's put together well. And you could say, I agree, but I don't want that representing my side because it's written poorly. We are going to have, this is a class in argumentation. We're going to do a lot of arguments. Right now, we're making sure that we can break down one and decide whether it's strong or not before we try it for ourselves. Hunter, next paragraph, you'll be presented.
You will be presented with 3 options for your evaluation paper. After you've selected an option, use the criteria list for argumentative writing you built together in class to determine whether you find the essay to be effective. Consider the different aspects of the rhetorical triangle when selecting your criteria and building your paper. You may select different aspects of the same point in the rhetorical triangle, such as 2 different aspects of pathos and 1 of ethos, or you may select criteria from 3 different points in the rhetorical triangle. Additionally, you will need to consider the opposing evaluation when writing your paper and address at least 1 point from a hypothetical evaluation that has the opposite evaluation from your own. In order to do this, you must determine that the essay is mostly effective or ineffective.
So let me break this down into a couple of different parts that are important to highlight. First of all, you do not have to use all 3 elements of the rhetorical triangle. You don't have to have a paragraph about pathos, a paragraph about ethos, a paragraph about logos. You can have different aspects of attempts at appeals to pathos. So for instance, in Let Them Eat Cash, you could have a paragraph that talks about his beginning and ending and his appeals to pathos with his sad story and then his tie back to the sad story at the end. And you also could talk about how his tone towards his resistant audience develops an appeal to pathos by showing that he understands them in a different paragraph. Does that make sense? Because these terms, the 3 parts of the rhetorical triangle, are broad umbrella terms. You want to narrow it down to the element of that term that you're focusing on in your critique. Additionally, we're going to move from a 5-paragraph format. You guys, I'm sure, are familiar. Introduction, 3 body paragraphs, conclusion. My fingers were not matching that, but whatever. It's not like it's going to be on video forever now. But one of the things that we're going to add, that wrinkle we're going to add, is a 6th paragraph that is explicitly designed to acknowledge opposing views. So we're going to call it a counter-argument or rebuttal paragraph. But you are not, your argument is analytical. So your rebuttal or counter-argument is about the opposing analysis. About the opposing analysis. So in other words, let's say that you think Let Them Eat Cash is mostly effective. and you have 3 points about its effectiveness. You talk about all the studies he did, talk about that stellar opening, you talk about how he treats his audience well. But then I also want you to acknowledge what flaws someone else might have found in his writing and why those flaws are not so big that you still think it's effective. In other words, let's say that you do think he's flawed in his lack of personal examples outside the opening. So you could acknowledge that and say other people might analyze this and think that his lack of attention to a particular specific anecdote undermines his pathos and ethos. And you could explain at length why someone would say that, but you also want to then say, however, they're wrong because, or however, that's not as important because he already establishes pathos with the first story or something. And you would talk about how either that analysis is overlooking something or that analysis is a minor detail, not as important as the overall analysis that you gave. And vice versa, if you think he's ineffective, your rebuttal paragraph would talk about one of his strengths in spite of the fact that mostly you think it's not as good as it ought to be. Does that make sense? Okay. Nate, could you read the rest of the middle part there? You will need.
You will need to write 6 full paragraphs to complete the sentence. The following is a potential outline.
And read through the outline real quick.
1, introduction. 2, point A. 3, point B. 4, point C. 5, counter arguments paragraph. 6, conclusion.
Finally, this paper is not only a demonstration of your knowledge of the rhetorical triangle and evaluation, but also your mastery of writing at the college level. Remember to apply the other writing strategies that you have encountered during class. You'll be expected to show that you can use 3x strategy for body paragraphs, transitions between and within body paragraphs, appropriate academic point of view, no I or you, strong sentence structure, avoiding comma splices, and appropriate formatting. So this is also my time to help train you in the default, typical college writing mode. Part of that is going to be getting the formatting down. It's like if you show up to a job interview in pajamas. It doesn't matter what your qualifications are, you've sunk yourself. If you show up with an MLA paper in a college class and you haven't put in Times New Roman, the professor's going to automatically think you don't know what you're doing before they've even read a word. They're like, oh, another one of these amateurs that don't use Times New Roman. And then everything is through that lens as they read. Same with the correct spacing, last name and page number, heading, etc. As far as grammar goes, I'm not going to judge you on random pieces of grammar. We're going to pick a couple of skills to work at, and I'm going to ask that you prove those on that paper, and then next time we'll add a couple more skills. And so it doesn't, if you have a random comma out of place or you forget a comma at the end of a dependent clause and what I just said sounded like foreign language to you, that's fine if we didn't study it in this class. What we are going to study for this first one is making sure that our thoughts are complete and punctuated correctly with regards to that. So comma splices, commas pretending to be periods, commas where periods should go. We're going to try to smite that, and we're going to try to make sure we don't have fragments. Additionally, papers like this are going to use third person. You're not going to use I or you. You, the personal pronoun you, to whom does that refer when you write it in a paper? What's that? The reader. And who is the main reader of your paper? So every time you use the word you, it's as though you type Mr. Hamilton in the middle of your paper. I don't want to be a part of your choose your own adventure essay. It gets really awkward when we get to social issues and you say something like, when you use cocaine, and I'm like, when? When did I, what? Or, when you murder someone, you should get the death penalty. And I'm like, why is there a law just for me? And did I do that while I was on the cocaine? Like, you want to be very precise with your pronoun use, because all pronouns have an antecedent. They have something they have to refer to. Second person refers to me. I don't want that, right? And first person tends to make you sound wishy-washy. and is really inappropriate for analysis anyway, because there's no personal real-life examples. You're not a professional writer, and you're not going to bring that up. But if you say something like, I believe the Chiefs will be good this year, or the Chiefs will be good this year, well, the second one sounds more assertive, right? And it came out of my mouth, so you know that I believe both those things. They're arguments I'm making. Same thing with a paper. Your name's at the top. So if you make an argument that's not in quotations, and you don't indicate otherwise it's someone else's, I assume you believe it. You don't have to say I believe or I think. It's a waste of space. And it makes you sound wishy-washy, especially in writing. So the assignment overview, 3 to 5 pages, double-spaced. You're thinking all our paragraphs now with 3x is 6 to 8 sentences. If you have 6 paragraphs of 6 to 8 sentences or 36 sentences, unless they're the most baby sentences ever, you're going to easily get to 3 pages. Standard syllabus, MLA format typed, 50 points in portfolio category. A couple of our larger papers are 75, but almost everything that's a test in here is either 50 or 75. And then the prompts right there, the paper options, those are your 3 options. Those are the 3 articles, and 2 of them are assigned for homework tonight or over the weekend. The other thing I might note, you might put a star by a works cited page will be required for this assignment. The citations will be provided by the instructor. So I'm going to give you the citations for each of the 3 essays, and that's going to be your only research. But I want to practice the formatting of the works cited page before it gets complicated. And so you're just going to have one source, and you're going to make sure you know how to put a works cited at the top and to start a new page and to have it there with a hanging indent. And if what I'm saying to you is complete gibberish, I'm going to show you before we have 8 to 10 of the sources and it gets complicated. Okay. Reminder, this is one of the 5 that's worth 70%. So when you're writing this paper that week, A-plaque has to be one of your number 1 priorities if your goal is to get an A in the class. Now we're going to have some TAs in here. We're going to have mentors. You're going to have peer editing. I'll help. There'll be chances, but you're going to have to take it seriously that week. And you can't say, okay, I'm going to slack off on this and do calc, because this is worth a lot of points in here. Okay. All right, let's go to the rubric real quick. We're going to mark this up. So my rubrics, I have 5 categories in my rubrics. You may be used to the good old 6 traits rubric of Mrs. Rhodes. And usually on these littler papers, 5 categories, each one's worth 10 points, and I don't worry about making one less than the other because it's confusing, I think. So it's just worth 10 points. Focus and purpose. The introduction does not open too broadly, builds towards a strong thesis statement, and sets up the essay. If your introduction is bad, you're not setting up the focus of your reader, you're going to lose points in focus and purpose. Exposition guides body paragraphs under one topic. You should underline that. Of the 3 X's in your body paragraphs, exposition, if your exposition struggles, you're going to lose points in focus and purpose right there. The essay is evaluative and avoids arguing for or against the response essay's point. I would like you to underline avoids arguing. We're not arguing with the author on the issue. And some of these articles, I've chosen particularly provocative ones that you may have a strong opinion on because I like setting a trap. And I want to see if you can avoid it and take a step back and just analyze. The counterargument paragraph is placed within the context of the author's overall point. By that I mean you don't go so strong the other way that we start to doubt which side you're on. So your counterargument, you can't say, it's good, it's good, it's good, and then the counterargument, it's the most terrible thing ever. You got to put it in the context and say, well, it has this one flaw. Development. The criteria for good argumentation are explicitly stated and apply to the essay being evaluated. The essay provides enough examples and explanation to fully develop its point. Examples don't overwhelm. I would like you to underline that sentence. So the other 2 X's, if they struggle, you're losing points in development. The essay demonstrates understanding of the rhetorical triangle, and the counterargument paragraph appropriately counters the opposing evaluation. You explain why you chose the side you did, basically. Organization. The arrangement of information ideas is logical and easy to follow. And then this one ought to be underlined. Transitional words or phrases connect ideas within and between paragraphs. And then the next one as well. Transitions from one paragraph to the next appear at the beginning of the paragraphs. A lot of the focus on organization with this first paper is just getting you to connect ideas. And it is combating the problem that students have in that you don't write the whole paper in one sitting, but you want the reader to read it in one sitting. And so what you do is you write a paragraph, and then you're like, oh man, I deserve a break. And you watch 4 episodes of Parks and Rec, and then you come back, and in your mind, in your life, there's been a big gap between those things. Your paragraphs start to feel like they're on an island, and then when I read it all at once, it's very clear where you stopped and took a break. And so we're going to try to get to a point where those transitions are very natural and you understand. And super important because during time writing, the difference between a really high-level writer and a writer that's just kind of getting it is the ability to use transitions as you go. Tone and style. The paper is written as a third-person academic essay. Second bullet point, you should underline or highlight the paper avoids first-person I and my, as well as second-person you and us. Third bullet point, this paper demonstrates control, variety, and complexity of tone. And quotes are integrated into the author's own words. Let's underline that. We're going to talk about quotation in a minute here, but I want you to get to the point where you can smoothly integrate quotes from the text, and I'll show you what I mean by that as we move forward. And the essay contains strong statements and avoids questions. I would like you to underline avoids questions. Your essay is in response to a question I have of you. Is this essay effective or not? Is the essay you're judging effective or not? So you shouldn't throw questions back at me. You're not trying to draw me in like Blotman is at the end. You're trying to answer my question, and so you shouldn't have questions. Editing and proofreading. The paper is free of surface errors. The paper avoids comma splices, run-ons, and fragments. I love it if you underline comma splices. We're going to smite those. The paper is formatted according to MLA guidelines. This includes the works cited page. Let's underline that. Super important to me that you get this down because there'll be professors even worse than me about having a bias against you if they see that. And then there are no contractions. Let's underline that too. There are some professors for whom contractions are the devil's work, and they must all be smited. And so I'm going to get you in the mode of not using them on formal papers so that you're ready. Let's flip the page, and I just want to show you. So when you turn your paper in, you're going to pull this out of your binder. Your paper will be turned in electronically through Turnitin.com. You'll pull this out of your binder, though, and you're going to fill in your self-reflection. And that's going to give me context for starting a conversation about your writing. So if someone thinks, let's say AJ thinks that his paper is the greatest paper of all time, and it's actually just an atrocity against mankind. It's the worst thing I've ever seen written by a student. Then I know that AJ has no idea what we were supposed to do. But if AJ tells me, I didn't have enough time for this, I had to choose between this and A-push, I chose A-push, I wrote it the night before, I didn't really take my edits into account, this isn't my best work, then I know that AJ needs help with his time management and prioritizing, not necessarily his writing. And on the other hand, if AJ has that paper and it's bad, and he says, I think I struggled, but I don't know how to make it better, then he identifies what he's supposed to do, but he doesn't know how to actually execute. And our conversation for all three of those started at a different point. And so that means that you can't lose this, because in 2.5 weeks, you're going to have to pull out your binder. And one of my random pet peeves, you know how teachers have random pet peeves? One of my random pet peeves is when people say, do you have an extra rubric on turn-in day? So I'm like, man, I organized the binder for you, put on every single worksheet where it goes, and told you to put it there. Please bring it back.